Kia ora everyone, let's talk about distributism. I'm here with Jamie Cox. He's married to Sarah. He's the father of 5 boys. He's a builder and he's interested in how we can live connected with the land, how we can live in a just way, how we can live in a sustainable way, in a way, I suppose, that allows us to flourish as human beings. But this word distributism is maybe something that is not familiar to a lot of people. So Jamie, tell us a bit about your journey exploring all these things and what this whole distributism movement is.
Yeah, cool. Well, thanks for inviting me along. I know we've both already talked about this, but for those listening, I'm no expert on this. I'm learning this. And so quite happy to be corrected, or more than I encourage you to go looking and learning, because it's a really interesting journey, and really it's a finger to capitalism. I think ultimately
Which finger?
it's well, it's pick your finger, but it's a finger. It's not the thumb. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah.
And it's not your marriage finger. But yeah, no, it's a finger to capitalism, and it really it's an interesting kind of conversation starter, if you like, and it's really challenging because I think at its heart it's a call to what it is to be truly Christian and to listen to our popes and to respond to what they're saying, especially popes in recent years. So kind of my journey started, love that word, my journey.
Yeah.
My time exploring this started probably 15-ish, 16 years ago, with just an interest in homesteading, and like the idea of living off the land, and ended up, once I was married, in a shared property with my in-laws and on 10 acres, and learning how to live off the land, and kind of they had some experience in it, so learning from them, but also, as modern day geeks do, is they get on YouTube and they look at everything, and they live it through everyone else's eyes but do very little themselves, which is probably my life in terms of homesteading. But yeah, did animals, cows, sheep, pigs, chickens, had goats, all that kind of thing.
So
And
is homesteading like a technical term?
a technical term,
I mean, does it have a very specific meaning?
yeah, well, I think amongst people who would call themselves homesteaders, maybe, I think people who say that they're a homesteader tend to think of themselves as those who predominantly work from the land, are agrarian based. Uh, Maybe from the outside they look like preppers. No, not quite, but yeah, producing their own food, trying to be as self-sustainable as possible, which was kind of my original thing. But moving further into it, you sort of start to learn that self-sustaining is actually not the Catholic thing, and so the Catholic thing was kind of a surprise for me, because I wasn't really looking for the Catholic part of this. I was just looking at the homesteading, how to be kind of back to the land, but a bit more real, having kids, get them back on the land. So the Catholic thing come about. I kind of bumped into Chesterton's stuff and a little bit of Helia Belloc, and I know the likes of Dorothy Day. I know we might look at some of her stuff later, but kind of that 1920s, early 1900s, there was a kind of a Catholic land movement, and I think that the word distributism was coined a little bit earlier than that, but kind of gathered momentum in that time, and I kind of fell into, or found my way into that kind of accidentally, and realized, there could be something here that's more than just a pagan homesteading way.
Right.
could be something good here that I hadn't quite seen. And I think really early on, I was really impacted by a talk that I heard at Hearts of Flame, and I can't remember the name of the priest, an African man, but he unpacked Genesis a little bit and talked about Adam and Eve and the Garden of Eden and man being made in the image and likeness of God, but planted in a garden to till and to guard, to be a gardener, and the curse on man being that he will work but not be fruitful. It's all to do with who he is and what he's made for. And then Christ, I think it's in Matthew, appearing for the first time after his resurrection, and the woman mistaking him for the gardener.
Right. Yeah.
And that had quite an effect on me, and still does today, because I feel like, well, there's two things that I'm really interested in, and that is, well, one is the connection, obviously, to being the old Adam to the new Adam, the connection to the garden. But I also wonder, only because I have such a limited imagination about what people wore or look like in those days, but what did one have to look like in those days for you to go, oh, that's the gardener?
Okay.
Like why did they go, and then it made it into scripture obviously as well, but that you look at Christ in that moment and go, oh, it's the gardener, like, duh, that's what he is. And then we are to imitate Christ. And so I feel like if we're to look like Christ, to be Christ in the world, well, maybe we should be confused for the gardener.
Okay.
So the talk, the scripture, the idea of who we are and what we're meant to be, kind of that echo in our DNA, if you like, of what it is to be human, to really get to know who you are and to express, I think, especially agrarian life, finding out your fatherhood and your manhood, to really guard, to defend, like a gardener knows what are weeds and what aren't weeds, how to feed, how to nurture, how to support, how to make things beautiful. And ultimately your end goal, especially as a man, is to make it beautiful for the highest point in your garden, which is your wife. And obviously her working beside you all the way, but your goal is she's the pinnacle of your garden. And you won't let like poor old Adam did, you won't let the devil in.
Yeah. So when you talk about the Catholic dimension,
yeah,
are you talking about more like there's a meaning behind all this activity that you previously weren't paying so much attention to, or are you saying there's actually a particularly Catholic way of approaching the homesteading or the agrarian lifestyle or the being the gardener?
Yeah, both, I think. Yeah, so I think that Catholicism will inform the way that you approach this, and that a homesteader at large. A good example is within the homesteading community, one of your goals is to be completely self-sufficient. Whereas from a Catholic point of view, that's almost goes against what we're on about. We're not little isolated islands, we're a community. And we're always looking to our neighbor to raise up our neighbor. We're always looking to gift ourselves to somebody else. You're not trying to be self-sufficient. And so I think in your approach then changes a little bit to homesteading. You're starting to think more than community, more than just your own kind of little agrarian life. You're starting to think, actually, how do I live this in community? How do I live this differently as a sign to the world of what it is to be Catholic?
So would you say there's this kind of dynamic tension, perhaps, between, on the one hand, just going with the flow of mainstream culture and living according to the way people normally live, and then the other extreme would be to try and be self-sufficient, to sort of say, well, we don't need this society or the culture anymore. We're going to go off and just be self-sufficient. But what you're describing is something in between, where you've got you are more connected to the land. You are producing, at least a good amount of the food that you eat, but you're still connected to the community around you.
I think in my poor way of explaining it, it's that your family life being the bedrock of society informs then the very economics of society. So if your family is rooted in Catholicism, then that will form the economics of society, and then vice versa. And so I'm not sure if I'm being clear, but and this is my finger to capitalism. Capitalism is not a Catholic thing. Capitalism is really has the same end as socialism or communism, and that a very few end up with the very most. It's been lauded for a long time as being the thing that has lifted so many out of poverty. But doesn't Christ call us to poverty and not to a slavery? And ultimately what capitalism seems to have brought us to is we're slaves to a wage. None of us really know how to provide for ourselves, except for the hours that we sell of ourselves in exchange for money that we can then purchase. We're sort of embedded in this capitalist world where you can't escape. You've got to labor, you've got to sell your labor, and then you've got to buy from that from these big businesses and big capitalist ventures. I'm not explaining myself very well, but
no, that makes sense. Your clock is 5 minutes fast, is it?
It might be, yeah. I think that makes sure that everyone gets out the door on time, actually. Yeah.
That's so good.
Yeah.
No, that's awesome. What was I going to say? No, I think it's interesting what you're describing, though I think it's maybe to many people it will seem a bit strange to be critical of capitalism in such a strong way, right? I mean, most people would acknowledge, there's abuses and there's excesses, and most people can see there's a consumerism in our culture that's not sustainable. But like, wouldn't you say that with capitalism and industrialism and the machinery we have, like we can transcend that world, which pretty much all the ancient world of the past, they always had slaves and stuff, and now we're free of slavery and
I think it's a different form of slavery.
You're talking about a wage slave. So what can you unpack that a bit more? Like, am I a wage slave because I'm a university chaplain? And
if I took your wage away from you, what does life look like for you in the next 2 weeks?
Well, the grass is growing well. I just have to learn how to eat that.
Yeah. And that's true of everyone almost. You take the wage away. Most people are absolutely fearful if they lose their job, then what?
Yep. I was made redundant in 2019. It's not too long ago. Yeah, so I can still remember that feeling of like, ooh. And there are benefits. There's a welfare system.
Yeah.
But it's obviously going to be still pretty tough, even just a short period where if you're relying on that, it would be very tough.
Yeah. And do you have any means to the provision of wealth other than the labor that you sell?
No, in terms of what I could produce myself, you mean? Yeah. No. I've got 3 rabbits. You want to buy a rabbit?
You can eat those. That'll last you a week.
Yeah.
3 meals stretched it out. Yeah. Yeah, no, we're slaves. We have no way outside of just selling those hours. We have no way of providing for ourselves, providing for our family. No means. There's no common land or common wealth from which, I mean, you could argue, oh, there's dock land, you could go and hunt. But when I say common land, I mean there's no common farmland or gardens. Again, people will argue, oh, there's some community gardens around the place, but they're few and far between, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's not that easy. Your ability to exist in this world is really based on whether you've got a job or not. And yeah, you can get a welfare, but it's not quite what people aspire to normally. And then more than that, like within the actual, that you kind of become stuck in, you give, and I think about this when I was working, and the jobs that I've had are, you might call good jobs because most jobs are good jobs. It's not good in that trick, but when I drive away in the morning at whatever time, and I basically go and give the best 8 to 10 hours of my life to somebody else, somewhere else. And I come home and the worst 3 or 4 hours are given to my family. And their worst 3 or 4 hours, because they're done as well, given to me. And we all go to bed and hit the reset and start again. And I think that there's this, and I think most people kind of get this, that there's a sense of like, maybe it's Groundhog Day, or maybe it's a sense of being trapped, but I think, and the popes have talked about this, but without a distribution of wealth, without access to means to real wealth, then we're slaves. We're slaves to a few people who own most of the stuff, most of the ability to provide wealth, and they get very rich, and you and I, while we go, oh no, yeah, but we're way better off than those people 300 years ago. We've got running water.
Yeah.
But are we? Are we more freer? That's not really seen it. More freer? Are we freer?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting question. And you get more optimistic and more pessimistic pictures painted of different eras in the past, don't you?
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I'm not calling for a return to say destitution. I think that's not what I'm saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that we're called to a life of poverty. We're called to have access to the means of real wealth. So that's everyone having access to property, not money, not tons of money, but just the means through wealth. So if I know that I've got land to fall back on, which we're really blessed at the moment, I've got a horrendous mortgage, not going to lie, and that's a trap in itself. But in order to get into land, it means that in the couple of times that things got tight, I've got 15 sheep walking around, and I've got half a dozen cows walking around, and there's chickens and eggs, and there's plenty of grass, and there's a creek and it's full of eels. And I know that worst comes to worst, I'm not going to starve, and my kids aren't going to starve. There's a certain freedom that starts to creep in then. And then the freedom kind of, you start to think, actually, I want to spend more time here. And so for me, it's been blessed. I prayed about it, and opportunity came up to contract someone who's doing cabins, and it meant that I could do a lot of work from home, and then the freedom to set my own hours, to be present to my family when at the best time for my family, and to work around that, because I'm still living in a capitalist world. I still have to find money to pay my mortgage and pay pay for certain material needs, of course, but what I'm searching for is freedom. And then I think, and part of the reason it's a finger to capitalism and a call to poverty is because most of us are entrapped in this idea of having excess. And actually, the church is really clear, like anytime you have excess, it's for the poor. It can't be for you. So excess to, say, invest in investments in another home, in a rental home, or investments to, say, put into stocks with Amazon, or to even, and this one's a real challenge, to even have KiwiSaver. All of those things are something that you do with your excess money. But the church is super clear, like that your excess money is for the poor. It's not for you. And you're called to be a steward of that, what you have. But a steward doesn't mean you kind of, in a capitalist way, try and shore up as much as you can and hold on to as much as you can and get to a point, where you feel like, I no longer have to rely on God because I don't have a mortgage, I've got all this passive income, other people laboring, in which the church really strongly says is, causes, essentially it's usury. It's the sin of usury, when other people are laboring and you are not, but you're making wealth off their labor. That's usury. And the church is very strong. A lot of Catholics today will say, oh, no, the church isn't that strong in usury anymore. We can do that. But that's not true. That's just people who love money. So anyway, in a really kind of fuddly way, I guess what I'm saying is I think that the call to being a Christian is radical. And I think that it involves trying to be as human as possible. And that means to escape as best as possible the claws of a capitalist society, which will seek to keep you a slave to a wage, to keep you a slave to your phone, to entertainment, to remove you as far as possible from what's real, what's in front of you, what's, whether it's agrarian life or family life or community and church. I just think we're called to kind of try to be radical in our life, and I'm trying to learn how to be.
No, that's interesting. So if I'm a normal guy with a family and a job, but I'm a bit concerned, right? Because they've announced the recession that we're heading into. I suppose it's been, well, I guess we have recessions about every 10 years or so, don't we? 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
But I think when we went into lockdown in 2020, I was just thinking to myself, this can't be good in the medium to long term when so many people just stop working and lots of payouts get made to prop us up. And then, like, there's got to be consequences to this. My understanding of economics is not great, but I was like, we are investing, actually, are we not, in something maybe pretty terrible that'll affect everyone, or that will probably affect the most vulnerable.
Yeah, it definitely did.
In the worst way, right? Yeah. And so thought, and then, sure enough, we announced that that there's a recession, and I guess no one knows exactly what that's going to mean, concrete terms. But like, does that mean that, like, how do I even start on this road? I don't own a property, I'm renting. The idea of getting like several acres of land out in the country, that seems like quite a long way away from me. So
yeah,
what would you say?
So that I would say do everything you can to remove yourself from the society in as much as it's trying to draw you from God. So if it means that with the little or the lot that you have, if it means that you're spending less time in front of the TV and more time making a veggie garden, if you are spending less time on a Sunday going to the mall and keeping people employed on the Lord's Day of rest, rather than actually being at home with your family or inviting friends over for a barbecue, I think trying to, even little things, trying to remove yourself, then, like for me, I just prayed. I said to God, okay, I need it now. If this is, what we're called to, and that out came. In terms of not totally out, I still have to do a job, but a job that I can work from home from, and kind of start to shift a little bit, not do choose my hours, which is nice, it's quite amazing. But so, certainly I'd say prayer it will be the bulwark. How do you say that word? Bulwark, yeah, to that sort of journey. But I'd start with the little things, and I would be praying, and then I think, and I find this the hardest, and I think for me recently, it's been a real God has been really working in my life is asking for help, and so there are wealthy people out there, or people that have means, and their job in the world, they may have come across that wealth by embracing a capitalist lifestyle and by earning it off the backs of other people's labor, but they can now do something good. Or maybe they inherited it. I shouldn't be so negative. Maybe they did something good and they've got all this wealth. Well, there are a lot of people with a lot of excess out there, and those people should be being asked to provide startup funds for people who want to get into their own business, or down payments on land so people can get back to the land. Or even, I think, I was listening to a talk by New Polity, which to the listeners I'd really recommend. They explain all this 1,000 times better than me. But if you went to...
That's a podcast.
Yeah. Podcast, and they do written stuff as well. But if you go to their New Polity podcast on Spotify, you can look through their money stuff in particular. Deals a lot with the money side of things, economics, as well as starting to look at community stuff. Where was I going?
You were talking about...
Oh, so the change in me? Yeah, so being brave enough to ask people with the funds to say, hey, God is actually calling you to give that to me. I'm poor.
It's a great message of good news, eh?
Yeah. That's where I was going. Sorry, going a little bit in circles. Something that Sarah and I noticed, or not noticed, just sort of it becomes obvious. We're blessed to have land. My parents helped us into the land. It's not like we had heaps of money to start with. We had a really fortunate opportunity. We got into a little bit of land, and for me, my focus was really agrarian. It's like, that's how we're going to do this. We're going to get back to the land, encourage other people to do it. Well, it's really expensive. You got a big mortgage to do it. It's a lot of work, and for very little return. Like, it's not like having 6 cows and 15 sheep pays you a lot of money. It puts meat in the freezer, but even just like, I'm learning myself now how to process my own meat, but even paying someone else to do that is horrendous. Like, it's still cheaper than buying it at the supermarket. So it's not like we have 15 acres. That's not making us a side income at all. In fact, we've put more money into it because we're trying to get fencing, soil, planting things out, like It's just a sink for money,
Yeah.
and it's a sink for time. And then you go, so really what we need is the ideal family work that's good and right ordered and as little but can provide for our family. And sort of secondary to that might be the land. And I was listening to a talk the other day, and it kind of helped to solidify kind of the process that Sarah and I were going through. And it's really that the communities around the world that have kind of managed to make this work are ones that, instead of thinking agrarian first, trying to find land and farm it because it's so intense. And most people, like, I had years of staring at YouTube or reading books about how to do cattle or how to get your grass right, or there's so much to learn when you've never been brought up on it. But going down the route of or communities that started with families being entrepreneurial, maybe it was candle making or some kind of family business, and shoring up a family business and letting that grow and gently succeed to the point where then having that kind of rock to stand on, they were able to jointly with other families purchase land, a common, which is a common was common, excuse the pun, hundreds of years ago. It's how people had access to protein, to animals and to stock, and people shared land in that sense. Yes, they had their own house, but the land may have been owned by a king or a duke or something, or it may have just been straight common land. But in all those cases, the peasantry had access to it in a way that they could share that land and share the labor on the land. And in some ways, were a lot wealthier than we were. There's again freedom with hours. They had good food, like proper food. They had the things that ironically we often look to for leisure, like trying to go for a walk out in nature, or go for a fish, or pet animals or something with your kids. Well, they were doing that every day as work, their hearts and minds lifted to God, reminded of who they are and what they are.
That makes sense. Because it's funny, like now for us, often an appropriate thing to do on a Sunday as like rest, leisure. For me, like sometimes just going out in the garden and do some gardening, or even like mowing some of the lawn, because it actually is what I feel like I need. I mean, it's maybe more of a Saturday job, but sometimes I just feel like that would make me just feel, I don't know, quite renewed.
No, 100%, absolutely, it does.
Because my work is largely there's administration and there's pastoral work, but neither of those are, utilizing my physical strength much at all. So
no, and not just that, like your smell, you're not in the sun, like it's like there's this whole, we're physical beings, and we've put ourselves into rooms with fake light and we stare at a screen all day. Like I think this pandemic that we've just had has been aptly called pandemic of the vitamin, I forget how you phrase it, but lack of vitamin D. People aren't outside, people aren't fit and healthy. I'm not saying that the past was amazing and we should return to the past, but I certainly think that there's things in the past we can grab and learn from, and I certainly don't think capitalism, as the recent popes are saying, is not the way to go. And that doesn't mean I'm a socialist or a communist either, and hence that's how the term distributism kind of finds its way in. But going back to just quickly what you were saying before, is how do you start? I think you start little things small, and I think that you pray about it, and I think you find like-minded people to kind of work in community with. And that may just be like my wife Sarah's really good at. We have kind of families around here who we try to see regularly, and we do that on feast days. So every feast day we try to, not everyone, but on big ones, we try to get together and do something, just to kind of keep that spirit going. And And probably in the beginning, like I was really like, oh, we all need to get back to land. And now I'm probably more like, actually, no, everyone needs to find their thing that as a family, their little business that they do as a family, that their children can work up and into. Their children may go on to do other things, but it gives them a means to learning discipline, to learning to work, to seeing how what it takes to support a family, and possibly even some financial means to kind of kickstart them into their next kind of part in life. And it's not easy in New Zealand being a small business owner, especially these last few governments are really hard on like the lockdowns are terrible like that. We went into our own kind of business right in the middle of lockdowns and it nearly killed us actually. It was pretty hard financially. So we're only just starting to kind of come out of that now, but we're still money wise on, but you know, it's hard work. And that's kind of where, oh yeah, I'm going in two different directions, but I do want to say, don't be afraid to start to, especially once you get it as a community, but or find a little community to be a part of, but to find people who are wealthy and say, hey, you should be giving your money to us. I have a business, and this is the business.
You have to say it in those words.
Yeah, however you want to say it, mate, but that's what you have to say. And I think because I'm so into, like my personality, the type of person I am, I'm really independent. I can't stand that. I don't like asking people for help. The idea of asking for money just doesn't, it feels like I'm not I can't provide myself, like for my family and for the needs of my family. It really, really does my head in. But recently, especially over this time with COVID, these lockdowns and stuff, and we were getting hammered. Like Sarah and her friends, they would chat and they'd talk and they all share their, what's going on in their lives and pray for each other. And without fail, and it still pisses me off, but without fail, like she'll be talking to someone one day and the next day that person's put $150 in our account or $300 in our account. And I'll be like, why is so-and-so giving us money? And she was like, oh, maybe they're just trying to help us. Because I was talking to them yesterday. I'm like, oh, man, we're all right. But actually the money, every time we've been given money, it's been amazing. It's been a blessing because it's right at a particular time where I'm like, oh, I don't have any money to pay that next bill or pay the groceries or whatever it is. But it's always been, and it irks me. I mean, Sarah's on a better hourly wage than I am because she talks to a friend for half an hour and next thing there's a few $100s in our bank account. It's ridiculous. So I say to her, it's not even real friendship she's charging for. It's but those are people who are being generous. They have a particular means and they're able to share it, and maybe at some point we'll be able to do the same in a different way. But for me, it's been a real learning, realizing that the community is important, that there's people who are going to be poor. And at the moment, I could say I'm wealthy in that I've got land, but I'm poor in that I've got debt and I'm struggling with the COVID stuff. So, financially, people are able to shore us up a little bit. I remember recently a homily by Father Isaac Frenson, and I hadn't thought about it this way, but the parable of the guy on the side of the road. That sounds terrible.
Oh yeah. The Good Samaritan.
Good Samaritan. Yeah, sorry, mind blank.
That happens.
Yeah. Everyone thinks of themselves as the Good Samaritan, the person who's helping the other. What to look for and what should you how do you live your life? Well, when you see that person on the side of the road, you should go and help them. Well, that's not necessarily like Jesus is the Good Samaritan. You're the guy on the side of the road. And when Jesus picks you up and takes you to the inn is the church. And when he says to the innkeeper, do X, Y, Z, that's the priest. And it's Christ who picks you up. It's Christ that helps you, Christ that gives, not you. And so often we think of ourselves as, when I have this money, I'm going to be able to help the poor. When I'm, we like to think of ourselves as benefactors. But Christ calls us to poverty, and you look at our religious orders, they purposely put themselves into poverty in as much as they'll say we will live on divine providence. We'll live on what other people give us. It's almost like forcing other people to be Christ-like, which is a good thing.
And when you say poverty, you're saying...
I'm not saying destitution.
Yeah.
So Aquinas, I think, put it like, I might get this wrong, Aquinas said, everyone should have as much as they need for the state of life or the position that they have. So
that means enough food, shelter, clothing, and Netflix. Oh wait, what?
Well, Netflix, no. Yeah. Netflix is you're buying into it. You're renting off the corporates, mate. No, don't worry. We indulge in the odd movie or whatever. Absolutely.
Yeah. But so what you're talking about, I guess there's the challenge for all of us to discern what's actually a need, right? And to distinguish a need from a luxury or...
Absolutely. Yeah. No, absolutely. And that's I find that hugely challenging, like, because always in the back of my head is how can I accrue more so that we are financially stable? But I forget that I'm no longer putting my trust in God. I'm putting it in what I can accrue to make sure that I'm okay.
Yeah.
For the next rainy day. And when that's all stripped away and you've got nothing, then it's a good lesson that actually it's okay. God does provide, and it's okay to ask. Now I'm still not okay. I'm still learning that lesson. Yeah. But I think when it comes to understanding the life that we're called to, right, and trying to escape capitalism, I think it's realizing that it's a big jump. You know, like you really are called to step away from, and maybe your little entrepreneurial business will be successful because God blesses it, and great. But the excess that you have will not be yours. The excess that you have will be to raise up your neighbor so that they have the same as you.
Yeah. So I think what I'm hearing is, because the thing, one of the things that distinguishes capitalism is that when your business does well, and profits, you invest back into the business, and so it can grow more, and so you pay less tax, and then it can produce more and more and more, and so you keep investing back into the business. And if you're really, really good and kind of lucky and all the stars align, then you've got the next like global corporation or whatever.
Yeah, that's right. But also off the backs of other people's work, you know, like you can't get there short of only paying people pittance compared to what you're earning, you know, as that owner of the business. Now people go, oh, you know, I've got a business and I earn bugger all. But normally when you're starting out or you're small, it can be hard. But when I'm talking about big business, like once people get a roll on, you know, I forget what it is that like you look at something, I don't know, a supermarket, they tend to employ like kids because they can pay minimum wage.
Yeah.
But supermarket owners earn a lot of money. They're not short of cash.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's usury for one. It's slavery.
According to the principles of distributism,
Yeah.
as I understand it, if your business does well and starts growing, then you get to a point where you say, oh, let's actually split this thing into two or whatever, because it's actually too big for us to like manage on this local family scale. And then, so you're kind of like, it splits and then it can split off, but it stays relatively small and local and intimate. Is that your understanding?
Yeah, I think there's sort of probably two approaches. You could split it and gift half of it if that's, but some businesses can't really be split in that sense. Maybe then you end up with that capitalist competition. So the other way is that your employers have the same ownership in the business as you. So you bring more people in and they have the same
Oh, the employees.
Sorry, employees. Yeah, sorry. Yeah, because then you're raising them up, right?
Mm.
Basically, you're not only saying, hey, come into the business and we'll pay you X amount a week, but you will also be, there's 5 of us and you'll be the 6th person. So we divide the business now 6 ways. You'll own a 1/6 of whatever the business as a whole earns.
So it's almost like the business is there to give people work and ownership that enables them and helps them to flourish as human beings.
Yeah, you said it better than me.
Instead of just making a profit.
Yes. Yeah, it's about raising up the person, the dignity of the person. And that's the thing, because labor is, John Paul II, I know, talks about this, and I can't give you quotes, but I should, but, labor at the very heart is the dignity of man. If we are made in the garden to labor, that's something in us that's good and holy, but when we are laboring in a way that, for $23 an hour, and we're barely making ends meet, there's no dignity in that. When our labor is just in a production line, I heard the other day, you hear all sorts of different stories about different factories, but one of my brothers works, probably shouldn't give too much away, but yeah, just a particular factory he was in, and these guys, have you seen it? It's like margarine tubs, and it was just guys in the line just scooping out of the barrel and just going thunk into the tub all day.
Yeah.
Thunk. There's no dignity in that. There's none. You're just a cog in a wheel. Yeah. And that's capitalism, is how can we best get as many people to work for as little as possible. That's really what capitalism is. So that the very few at the top who own the most of the stuff, they're wealthy beyond, unbelievably wealthy. Yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and I suppose we say that we don't have slavery anymore, but even aside from the whole wage slave thing, which is a different definition, but I think we have generally moved the slavery offshore, and Western countries have moved it offshore. So there's somewhere in Asia or Africa or somewhere else where people are working practically in slave-like conditions.
Yeah.
To produce a lot of the raw materials that are needed to create the machines that we can use, so we don't need slaves.
Yes, no, absolutely. Or to have stuff that's so cheap that that we can. The irony, I found it. The fruit that recently, I forget the brand, but it was like frozen berries, and they were causing hepatitis.
Oh, okay.
A or B.
Yeah,
it's a big thing in the news recently. But the reason for it is because in the countries where that fruit's picked, they don't have adequate toilets, and so they're not washing their hands, and I don't know what the toilets are like, but their hygiene's very low, and so. But that's what we need if we want cheap fruit. We need cheap labor, and we need labor that has shit-like conditions.
and I suppose that means that, like the indication that there's not good hygiene, and that means that there's probably a very low standard of life in general. Like, points to lots of problems and lots of things that are lacking in that.
Yeah, but as a capitalist would say, but they're earning $3 a week, Kim, and that's better than what they had before. And I would say, I'm not so sure that it is. You've removed them from the land and their cultural way of life. You've removed them from the knowledge that they had to live, to truly live, not just work for somebody, exchange their hours in the day, but to actually, make clothes, dress down a beast for food for the family, to harvest, to fish, to read the seasons, and more than an agrarian way of life, like to I don't know, to be metalsmith, we call it, like it,
Yeah.
all those sort of trades, we're losing all of that. I think Chesterton talked about it, like we're becoming, forget the term, specific. We're being really so specific in our work as opposed to being,
Specialized.
as opposed to being generalists.
Yeah, yeah. And the argument for that is that if you get everyone to specialize in what they can do most efficiently, then the whole system is more efficient,
Yeah.
right? So everyone's doing say if you've got lots of resource for a certain thing in one country, then that country produces that thing for the whole world, right? They're sorted, and then we all do what we're best at. And so that's really the global economy that we've got.
Gross.
But from a distance, the world looks blue and green, I suppose.
And it's getting greener, ironically.
But maybe up close in some places, it's not so pleasant.
Yeah.
There's also I think I was reading a book recently. I think it was called "The End of Civilization is Just the Beginning" or something. It was an interesting book, and it's no critique. There's no critique of the economic system we have as such. It's just a warning, and it talks about the sort of it paints a big picture through history, from ancient history to the present day, particularly with the economic growth that we've seen, and to the sort of global economy that we have today. It's a very interesting picture. But the author is arguing that it doesn't look like this global economy is going to last much longer. And there's a lot in the book. It goes into lots of aspects, but one of the big ones is shipping. That shipping is very, very cheap, very, very efficient. We can move things around the world. You've got these huge container ships that can hold thousands and thousands of containers on them. They are sitting ducks in the water, but because basically the American Navy patrol the waters of the earth, these ships are safe. And the author's saying he doesn't think that the Americans are going to keep doing that to the same extent for much longer. So the global system we have, because it depends on that security, it's gonna, not going to continue the way it is for much longer. That's what he thinks. And that got me thinking, because I was like, oh, okay. And I straight away started thinking about the land, because I thought, oh, we need to have at least some means to support ourselves in some way. And at the time I was renting a property that was very small. Couldn't grow more than a few lettuces really up the back. And we've since moved to a proper quarter-acre section with a lot more space, a lot more scope. But it's interesting. I think we're definitely living probably towards the final chapters of, or the end of this chapter, which you could sort of say is since World War II, where this global economy has really flourished. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, is it coming to that part, coming to an end? I'm not very good at tea leaf reading, I mean, you saw with the pandemic, shipping basically completely changed, because with the Americans in lockdown, from what I understand, I could be quite wrong on this, but I understood that they're all at home, so they're ordering more stuff. So the demand to America was a lot higher, and so stuff was being shipped. Ships basically stopped coming this way and went to America instead. And so the market is hugely fickle. That hammered us, especially a small business, getting supply. At one point I went to one of the suppliers to get jib, which, as everyone knows, I mean, it's made in New Zealand, but it was jib, plywood. Couldn't get plywood, but and both the jib and the plywood, they basically said, unless you're doing $1 million order, we can't help you. And so it's big businesses who could do $1 million order, and little guys that were locked out of the market. But yeah, again, big business America, who they set the demand during that time because everyone's at home buying stuff. And small business New Zealand is now on the back foot.
Yeah.
So yeah, I suspect that things are a lot more shaky than one might think, that the world's very dependable and you know, stuff's going to keep arriving, but I don't know if it will always.
Yeah. Well, I guess the whole pandemic thing showed us, didn't it, that things can just all of a sudden change or shut down or
yeah, that's right. And what happens when, say, a country like China, like, I mean, there's all sorts of predictions with them, you know, their population dramatically decreases over the next while because of their one-child population. Well, they're producing so much crap, but then suddenly they're not producing that much crap. So then what happens? And they carry huge debt. Or what happens if tomorrow there's a massive rebellion in China and all the people rise up and communism's kicked out and everyone goes, we're not making crap for the world anymore. I mean, that's a pipe dream, but, you know, I think things can change so quickly. The war with Russia, which is hugely complex between Russia and Ukraine, but that's having it looks like it's having effect on certain produce around the world.
And parts of Europe like Germany and other places that rely on Russia and
oil.
So hey, just a little bit of a turn. Like we started talking about the agrarian lifestyle. You mentioned that, you know, that doesn't have to be the starting point, right? And you talked about, I guess, being entrepreneurial. I guess we're talking about the technical term is the means of production, right? And so one of those is land, but there's also other ways to be kind of harnessing the means of production instead of just being a wage worker. What are some other ways that you can think of, particularly for people that don't live in rural areas? But what does that look like? Taking a small step towards subsistence, I suppose, or being able to produce something.
Yeah, I mean, there's probably a world of, the recession's going to throw a little bit of hardship on this. I'm not going to lie, that small businesses are going to do it hard, I think, rather than big businesses. So take this with a grain of salt, I guess, for the next little while. But I think, think about the village. For me, that's probably the most helpful that I, picture in my head, where I think that in the efforts of subsidiarity, that, you know, as much authority and decision making should be given to the family as possible, and then to his local community, the village, and then on to state to a lesser degree. And so in the village, there should be, we should have lots and lots of little villages, not very few villages and a few great huge cities, you know, where everyone goes into cities. We need more villages. And those villages need to be filled with people on the outskirts who are more agrarian. They're going to be cows and milk and cheese, or goats and cheese, or wool for making stuff, or forestry, or veggies, or whatever it is. And then as you move into the little village, within walking distance of each other, you have the bread maker. And I know, like, we've got friends that the Gaines is sort of doing heritage stone ground bread out of Te Amuru, and it's not been an easy journey for them either. The lockdowns have really hammered them, but they're just starting to just get a point where they're kind of getting, it's hard work, but they're just about getting there. And their bread's amazing, and it's quality. It's made with heritage grain. It's fermented, I believe. It's amazing bread. It feels good. Doesn't, you know, like I I notice when I have bread, I feel a bit jittery, but down the track, I cannot have bread and then do building for the day. Like I can't have toast in the morning, it just kills me.
Yeah.
But their bread's unbelievable. Like it's really, I would say, nutrient dense. So they've done bakery, but what else in the village? And then I think almost anything else to a degree. You know, whether it's the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. I mean, yeah, there's so many things. And I think what's cool at the moment is there's a general movement anyway, just supporting locally made, handmade produce. And so I think there's a chance to capture that wave anyway.
Yeah.
So I think you're looking for something that gives you life and enjoyment. I know with the Gainses, when they're doing bread, he took up bread making during lockdown because he was fascinated by it and he loved it, got really into it. And then they started doing pizzas and selling, you know, stone ground pizza base, but, you know, pizzas at markets and stuff. And then that developed into bread and it's a love and a passion for them. They love it and they're getting really, you know, into it. I'm more of a sort of twofold. I'm still trying to find my little way in the world. So mine's more carpentry. I like working with my hands in that sense. So I've got a couple of ideas that I'm going to trial and have a go at. And some may fail and some may kind of take off. And at the same time, I'll pray and ask God to kind of help me find that way. You know, I just think that I'm not chucking a lot of ideas out there, but I think if you think about the village life, what you could offer a village life and what excites you, what interests you. And there's so much, I mean, it could be a way, like if you're a teacher, you know, the growing homeschool movement at the moment is massive. Maybe there's a way that you can kind of tap into that. I don't know. There will be a way for everyone. But I think the village life, and I think as well, like if I have a kind of a long term, if I have a big vision, if I could kind of click my fingers and be like, boom, like tomorrow it's all working out. Like, and I've talked a lot. Someone else who would be probably more articulate than me and better to talk to might be Alex Bailey. Him and I've done a lot of talking about this over the years, and both of us have read in sort of different areas. And we've both kind of talked about, you know, when you're trying to get a community together or even a village, because for a while there we thought about, you know, find an old village in New Zealand, one that is pretty run down, like, and half the shops are boarded up and closed, and get like 10 families, and you all move there and you just get going, and you change the town because there's 10 families.
Yeah.
And you get parish life going, the church life going, and you all work together to get your little businesses going, and you basically refound a village that's already there, that already has the buildings and the hall and the community grounds and stuff.
Yeah.
There's kind of something in there. But I think there's merit in this idea of having commons as well. So common land where people can run, you know, add a cow to a herd of cows, and where a group of families can harvest big crops of food together and kind of lessen the burden of that. And so then the question is, well, who owns the commons, or how does the commons come about? Certainly you need wealthy people, but I think something to ponder for some places, and this is, I'd love to see this, is and I think you're seeing it naturally in Leithfield with the Beatitudes community. But I think that in the tradition of the old European cities, you had, ironically, with, I guess, even further back, when you think about the Benedictine order, that withdrew from the world at a time where things were going topsy-turvy. And they essentially created a library and kept the rhythm of the church. And then people started moving in around, and now when you go through Europe, those little villages tend to surround a little monastery.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, and so in the monastery, I love that picture, the Angelus picture, you know, the couple in the field.
Yeah.
Which is another, I should have sort of said earlier, as something else that always sticks in my head is the idea of working in the field, but hearing the bells
Yeah.
at the right time. And I think because it's very hard, well, it's not hard. Some people are really called to a certain community, a certain spiritual life, a certain way, Benedictine, Dominican, whatever. But a lot aren't. A lot are just called to be Catholic in the world. But there's something about not having, especially as a family, not having the burden of that. How do I say that? Hearing the bells. So, you know, that when you're out, when you're with your sons in the field and the Angelus bell rings, you all stop and you pray and then you carry on. And the monks have got the mass sorted, and the monks keep your eyes fixed on God, or it could be the sisters, whichever order you want to kind of get in. But then they also hold the commons, the land.
Yeah.
They keep it for the use of all people.
Mm.
They help to, you know, this much of what is given is going to go to the poor, and this much will make sure helps to feed the local villages or whoever's helping on the land, you know. And but at the same time, they're teaching your kids the faith, and they're marrying your children to each other, and they're keeping your eyes fixed firmly on heaven. Because I think that's the goal. That's the Our Father, Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven.
Yeah.
I really don't think, and someone can prove me wrong, but I don't think there's capitalism in heaven. I'm just not sure that there is.
Yeah.
I don't think we're trying to amass stuff.
No, heaven is a commons, definitely. Right?
Yeah, and I think,
and there's a resurrection of the body, which means we're
labor.
Yeah, but not labor in the sense of drudgery, but in the sense of like fruitfulness, I suppose.
Absolutely, yeah. The thing that we lost in the curse.
Yeah.
No, absolutely. And I think but we still want to strive for that on earth.
Yeah.
As the Our Father says, you know, and so we want the village, and we want the church at the heart of it. And I think it has to be because when I look around at our Catholic churches, I think what's keeping us alive in New Zealand is the immigrant church for sure.
Yeah.
But, you know, really is an aging church. There's not, I mean, you and I know probably nearly every Catholic family in New Zealand between us, probably. Maybe not quite, but, you know, it's almost like that.
2 degrees of separation, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And I think there needs to be almost a refounding or a pulling back, like Benedict did, a little bit from the world. And a lot of people get a bit cross about that. They say, oh, you're running away. You shouldn't run away from society. We're supposed to be in society. But I think of the Taiwan nuns in Nakuru, who are a contemplative order. And I remember when they were, because I was working for the diocese at the time, when they were established down there, and their job being contemplative, they're not out on the streets, they're not out in the neighborhoods, they're just there praying. They're a light on the hill, and people on their street started coming to mass. People were curious about them. There's something good there. Of course, grace is working, and they come of their own fruition. You know, like when you set up a light on the hill, people come. Like the most pilgrimed to group in America are the Amish.
Wow.
Like something like 20 million people a year go to have a look at what the Amish are doing.
Yeah,
because there's something really attractive about that. They're not going out. And so I think sometimes there's like the Benedictines did way back, there's a time to pull back from the world a little bit, and the world's nuts at the moment. Like, it is nuts. And so I think maybe the time is to pull back and to re-establish a village, but to maybe do that somehow around a monastery or a community. I think an established monastery who you know will be there 300 years. The more I've thought about it, this idea of starting your own little community with a group of families, I think it's quite hard. Yeah. Hard leadership wise. It's hard to, you know, it's easy to kind of have fights with each other. And you know, the Clear Creek Abbey in America, Clear Creek Abbey. I think they're Benedictines. My wife Sarah spoke to one of the guys who lives there. He's not a monk, sorry, he's a married man, but his family moved to be close to the monastery. Same thing, monastery in the middle of nowhere, completely in the middle of nowhere. So much so that, yes, you can buy land around it, so families do, but it's so far away, they have to be entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
So he gets his kids to come up with ideas, like his kids, I think one of his kids was buying and selling knives. He was a younger kid and loved knives. So that's what he was doing. This guy, he's a homeschooler, the father that Sarah met, and he basically designed a homeschool curriculum, which is used now by a lot of people. And he happened to be speaking in New Zealand, and he was saying, you know, what's fascinating is that, yeah, people are drawn to move close to the monastery because, again, maybe it's romantic of me to say you can hear the bells, but that's the idea.
Yeah.
And but he said it's all sorts of people, which you would never normally get in a community. Like they wouldn't hold themselves together. They're held together because the monastery's there. But he said you've got people who are there with their bells and their guitars, and if they get a chance to do mass, then it's bells and guitar. You know, it's very charismatic. And he said, and there are others there that cannot stand it, but they're the organ and the chant but they're all there, and they have I think he said it once a week they get together as a community and dance.
Okay.
Do some kind of community thing, and they're entrepreneurial. And it's not, and he said it's not a perfect community, but I think the glue there is the monastery.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, that's cool. Well, thanks, Jamie, for painting that picture of the village and the idea of centering around kind of a spiritual and material commons of the monastery. I think we might round things up. But yeah, it's been a good conversation, and I also take on board your recommendation. Maybe round 2. I might talk to Alex. That'd be cool as well. But I really enjoyed the conversation, especially, I suppose, that you're authentic, you know, because you're searching, you're on the search yourself, and you're living it, and you're honest that it's not hard, easy or perfect, but yeah, I find it quite inspiring. I'm really encouraged anyway. So yeah, thanks for your witness.
All right, so thanks for the opportunity, and just a reminder, like, I think if people want to learn a little bit more, go to a group like New Polity, and listen to some of their stuff, and look up Chesterton and Distributism. Dorothy Day, there's a number of people out there, but just like, I'm very sorry, I'm not very good at articulating these things. I like to ponder them, but
no, I think it's fine. Like, as I said, I think you painted us a good picture, and and it's a work in progress, right? Yeah,
absolutely.
So I think there'll be plenty of inspiration anyway for people watching this to get some ideas of their own, and to be entrepreneurial, and to see how they can connect maybe more with the land. And I think we're in a great country to do it too.
Yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah, let me know how you go with your venture.
Great, thanks a lot, Jamie. It's been great chatting with you. We'll catch you later.
Yeah, God bless.